The emergency radio crackled to life at 3:47 a.m., shattering the quiet of Gabriel's patrol shift. Unit 23, Code Blue. Unresponsive female, possible cardiac arrest at 1247 Maple Drive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Gabriel's hands were already reaching for his equipment before dispatch finished speaking. 23 years as a paramedic had trained his body to move before his mind could process the weight of another life hanging in the balance. What he couldn't have known as he raced through the empty streets of Riverside County was that this call would collide his professional world with his personal nightmare in the most impossible way imaginable. 6 months earlier, Gabriel had walked out of Judge Robert Martinez's courtroom with his world shattered into pieces. The gavel had come down with finality that echoed through his chest like a death sentence. Sole custody awarded to his ex-wife Sarah. Visitation limited to supervised weekends twice a month. The judge's words still burned in his memory like acid. Mr. Chen, while your dedication to saving lives is commendable, your unpredictable schedule and high-stress profession create an unstable environment for a child. This court must prioritize what's best for Lucas, and that means consistency and reliability that you simply cannot provide. Gabriel had stood there in his best suit, the same one he'd worn to his father's funeral, watching his 7-year-old son disappear behind Sarah and her lawyer. Lucas had pressed his small face against the courtroom window, mouthing, "Daddy," with tears streaming down his cheeks. The sound of that gavel had been the sound of his family dying. Judge Martinez hadn't even looked at him when he delivered the verdict. His cold eyes focused on the paperwork that reduced Gabriel's relationship with his son to legal terminology and scheduled appointments. The months following the custody hearing had blurred together in a haze of overtime shifts and empty takeout containers. Gabriel threw himself into his work with the desperate intensity of a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. Every emergency call became a chance to prove Judge Martinez wrong, to demonstrate that his profession wasn't just about chaos and unpredictability, but about being exactly where people needed him when their world was falling apart. His apartment had become a monument to absence. Lucas's bedroom kept exactly as he'd left it. Superhero posters still decorating walls that no longer heard bedtime stories, or sleepy questions about why Daddy had to leave for work. His partner Rodriguez had watched Gabriel's transformation with growing concern. The man who used to crack jokes during their shifts had become grimly efficient, taking on the most dangerous calls without hesitation. "You're going to burn out," Rodriguez warned him repeatedly. "This job will eat you alive if you let it become everything." But Gabriel couldn't explain that work was all he had left, that each life he saved felt like a small redemption for the one relationship he'd failed to protect. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could restart hearts but couldn't repair his own broken family. He'd memorized every medical protocol, could intubate in the back of a moving ambulance, could bring someone back from the edge of death with steady hands and precise movements. Yet he couldn't navigate a family court system that saw his calling as a liability rather than a strength. The same skills that made him exceptional at saving strangers had somehow marked him as unfit to raise his own son. That Tuesday night shift had started like countless others. Gabriel and Rodriguez had handled 3 calls already: a minor fender bender, an elderly man with chest pains who turned out to be having an anxiety attack, and a teenager who'd had too much to drink at a house party. Gabriel's mind was already calculating how many hours until he could crash into his empty bed when the radio delivered the call that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. As he guided the ambulance through streets he knew by heart, Gabriel had no idea he was racing toward a collision between his past and future that would redefine everything he thought he knew about justice, forgiveness, and the mysterious ways that life sometimes offers second chances when you least expect them. The house at 1247 Maple Drive sat in darkness except for a single porch light that cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Gabriel had responded to calls in this neighborhood before, where the houses were spread apart by generous lots and the silence was broken only by the distant hum of air conditioning units. As he and Rodriguez pulled their equipment from the ambulance, Gabriel's trained eye automatically cataloged the scene. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no indication of violence. The front door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling from the interior. A man in his 50s burst through the doorway before they reached the steps. His graying hair was disheveled, his expensive pajamas wrinkled from sleep, and his eyes held the wild panic that Gabriel had seen thousands of times before. The look of someone watching their world collapse in real time. "Please, you have to help her," the man gasped, his voice breaking. "I found her collapsed in the kitchen. She was making tea, and then she just went down. I tried CPR like they taught us in that class, but I don't know if I'm doing it right." Gabriel's professional calm settled over him like armor. "Sir, I need you to take a deep breath and tell me your name. We're here to help." The man's hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "Robert Martinez." "My wife Elena, she's inside. Please, she's not responding." Gabriel felt something cold settle in his stomach at the name, but his training kicked in immediately. Personal recognition would have to wait. A life hung in the balance. They followed Robert through a tastefully decorated living room where family photos lined the mantelpiece, past a kitchen where an overturned teacup lay shattered on Italian tile, to where Elena Martinez lay motionless on the hardwood floor. Gabriel's assessment was swift and automatic. Mid-40s, unconscious, skin pale with a bluish tint around the lips that indicated poor oxygenation. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, barely perceptible. Gabriel dropped to his knees beside her, his fingers finding her neck to check for a pulse while Rodriguez set up their equipment. "Weak and thready pulse, respiratory distress," Gabriel called out, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of treating the wife of the man who had destroyed his family. Rodriguez was already prepping the oxygen while Gabriel began his examination. Elena's medical alert bracelet caught his attention. Severe allergic reactions to shellfish and certain medications. He filed the information away as his hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her pupils, testing her responses. "Mr. Martinez, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight," Gabriel said while continuing his assessment. "Did your wife eat anything unusual? Take any new medications? Any changes in her routine?" Robert paced behind them, his bare feet making soft sounds on the floor. "She had dinner with her book club tonight. They went to that new seafood place downtown, Pier 27. She came home around 10, seemed fine. We watched some television, went to bed around midnight. I woke up when I heard something crash in the kitchen." Gabriel's suspicions crystallized immediately. Delayed allergic reaction, possibly anaphylaxis triggered by cross-contamination at the restaurant. Elena's breathing became more labored even as he watched, confirming his diagnosis. "Rodriguez, I need epinephrine now. We're looking at severe anaphylaxis." His partner was already drawing the medication as Gabriel prepared the injection site. This was the critical moment, the narrow window where his skills and experience would determine whether Elena Martinez lived or died. The epinephrine went into her thigh with practiced precision. Gabriel continued monitoring her vital signs while Rodriguez prepared additional medications and contacted the hospital. Minutes stretched like hours as they worked, Gabriel's hands steady despite the emotional storm raging in his chest. This was Judge Martinez's wife, the woman whose husband had deemed Gabriel unfit to raise his own son. Yet here he was, using every skill he possessed to save her life. Elena's breathing began to improve within minutes of the epinephrine injection. Her color started returning, the dangerous blue tint fading as oxygen reached her system more effectively. Gabriel felt the familiar rush of relief that came with pulling someone back from the edge, the same feeling that had driven him to become a paramedic 23 years ago. Life was sacred, regardless of personal history or painful associations. "She's stabilizing," Gabriel told Robert, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "We need to get her to the hospital for continued monitoring and additional treatment. Anaphylactic reactions can sometimes have a secondary phase hours later." Robert's relief was palpable as he watched his wife's breathing become more regular. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was losing her." As they prepared Elena for transport, Gabriel caught Robert staring at him with growing recognition. The judge's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, giving way to uncomfortable awareness. Gabriel met his eyes steadily, maintaining his professional demeanor even as the irony of the situation settled between them like a heavy weight. Here was the man who had declared Gabriel's profession made him an unfit father, now watching that same profession save his wife's life. "You're," Robert began, then stopped, his voice catching. Gabriel continued securing Elena to the stretcher, his movements efficient and gentle. "I'm the paramedic treating your wife, Mr. Martinez. That's all that matters right now." But both men knew that wasn't entirely true. The past 6 months hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. The ride to Mercy General Hospital was tense, with more than just medical urgency. Gabriel monitored Elena's condition while Rodriguez drove, the familiar rhythm of emergency transport offering a strange comfort amid the emotional complexity of the situation. Elena had regained consciousness halfway to the hospital, confused and frightened but stable. Gabriel had explained what happened in soothing tones, his bedside manner honed by decades of comforting patients in crisis. Robert rode in the front passenger seat, stealing glances at Gabriel through the rearview mirror. The judge, who had been so confident in his courtroom, so certain of his decisions, now seemed diminished by the night's events. Gabriel wondered what was going through his mind, whether the man was capable of recognizing the contradiction between his professional judgment and the reality unfolding before him. At the hospital, Gabriel helped transfer Elena to the emergency department team, providing a detailed report of her condition and treatment to Dr. Patel, the attending physician. His job was officially done, but he found himself lingering in the hallway, watching through the glass doors as Robert sat beside Elena's bed, holding her hand with the desperate gratitude of someone who had almost lost everything. "Hell of a thing," Rodriguez said quietly, appearing beside Gabriel with 2 cups of coffee from the vending machine. "You okay with all this?" Gabriel accepted the coffee, its bitter warmth grounding him in the moment. "I'm fine. We did our job. She's alive. Because we were there." But even as he said it, Gabriel knew that the night's events had shifted something fundamental in his understanding of justice, mercy, and the strange ways that life sometimes forced people to confront their own assumptions about each other. As they walked back toward their ambulance to return to service, Gabriel couldn't shake the image of Robert's face when recognition had dawned. The man who had so confidently stripped away Gabriel's parental rights had just witnessed the life-saving value of the very profession he had deemed incompatible with responsible fatherhood. Gabriel wondered if that recognition would change anything, if it could possibly matter in the cold machinery of family court proceedings. But as he climbed back into the ambulance, Gabriel realized that something had already changed, not in the legal system, but within himself. He had saved a life tonight. Not because of who Elena Martinez was married to, but because saving lives was what he did. That clarity felt like the first step towards something he hadn't dared hope for in months. The flowers arrived at the fire station 3 days later, an elaborate arrangement of white lilies and blue hydrangeas that seemed out of place among the utilitarian equipment and worn furniture of the common room. Chief Williams called Gabriel over with a puzzled expression, holding a cream-colored envelope. "Chen, these came for you." Delivery guys said they were from a grateful family. Gabriel's stomach tightened as he recognized the elegant handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a card with a simple message written in careful script. "Thank you for giving me back my life, Elena Martinez." Below it, in a different, more masculine hand, "We would like to speak with you when you have time, Robert Martinez." Gabriel stared at the words, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The other paramedics gathered around, curious about the expensive flowers that had transformed their break room into something resembling a funeral parlor. "Must have been some save," Rodriguez commented, examining the arrangement. "These aren't hospital gift shop flowers. Someone spent serious money." Gabriel folded the card and slipped it into his pocket, unsure how to explain the complicated history behind this gesture of gratitude. How could he tell his colleagues that the woman whose life he'd saved was married to the judge who had declared him an unfit father? That every time he looked at Lucas's empty bedroom, he was reminded of Robert Martinez's cold assessment of his character. The rest of the shift passed in a haze of routine calls, but Gabriel's mind kept returning to the card in his pocket. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to maintain the professional distance that had protected him through countless difficult calls. But another part, the part that still believed in redemption and second chances, wondered what Robert Martinez could possibly want to say to him now. 2 weeks passed before Gabriel finally worked up the courage to call the number on the card. Elena answered on the second ring, her voice warm and stronger than it had been that night in the ambulance. Mr. Chen, I was hoping you would call. I know this might seem strange, but Robert and I would very much like to thank you properly. Would you consider joining us for dinner this weekend? Nothing formal, just the three of us. Gabriel hesitated, his fingers drumming against his kitchen counter. Through his apartment window, he could see children playing in the courtyard below, their laughter echoing off the brick walls. Mrs. Martinez, I appreciate the gesture, but that's really not necessary. I was just doing my job. Elena's pause was thoughtful before she responded. Mr. Chen, I know about the custody case. Robert told me everything after that night. This isn't just about thanking the paramedic who saved my life. This is about two people who need to have a conversation that's long overdue. The restaurant Elena chose was small and intimate, far from the courthouse where Gabriel's fate had been decided. When he arrived, he found the couple already seated in a corner booth, Elena looking healthy and vibrant in a soft green sweater, Robert appearing uncomfortable in casual clothes that seemed foreign on his judicial frame. The judge stood as Gabriel approached, extending his hand with visible effort. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Gabriel shook the offered hand, noting how Robert's eyes couldn't quite meet his. You said you wanted to talk. They settled into an awkward silence broken only by the server taking their drink orders. Elena seemed to sense the tension, her hand finding her husband's arm in a gesture of support. Robert has something he needs to say too. You, she said gently. But first, I want you to know that what you did that night, the skill and compassion you showed, it reminded me why I fell in love with a man dedicated to justice, even when that dedication sometimes blinds him to the full picture. Robert shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting with his napkin. Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology. Not just for the custody decision, though that's part of it. I owe you an apology for making judgments about your character without truly understanding who you are. Gabriel felt something cold settle in his chest. You made your decision based on the evidence presented to you. That's your job. But Robert shook his head, his expression pained. No, that's where you're wrong. I made my decision based on my own fears and prejudices. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Gabriel had expected. Robert spoke haltingly about his own father, a police officer who had missed countless school events and family dinners in service to his job. He talked about growing up feeling like he competed with his father's badge for attention, about promising himself he would never subject a child to that uncertainty. When I saw your case, I saw my own childhood. I projected my own resentment onto your situation without considering that not every first responder is like my father was. Elena added her own perspective, describing her work as a pediatric nurse and the children she'd seen thrive in single-parent homes where love and dedication mattered more than conventional schedules. Some of the best parents I know are doctors, nurses, firefighters, people who choose professions that require sacrifice because they believe in something bigger than themselves. I should have testified at your hearing, should have told Robert what I see every day in my work. Gabriel listened, his emotions cycling between anger and cautious hope. Your insights are appreciated, but they don't change what happened. Lucas is still living with his mother. I still see him 4 days a month under supervision. Your late realization doesn't undo 6 months of damage. Robert flinched at the harsh words but didn't defend himself. You're absolutely right, but it might help me make different decisions going forward, better decisions. The dinner stretched into the evening as 3 people who had been connected by crisis began to understand each other as human beings rather than legal adversaries. Robert spoke about the weight of making decisions that affected families, about sleepless nights second-guessing his rulings. Elena shared stories from the pediatric ward that revealed her deep understanding of child psychology and family dynamics. Gabriel found himself talking about Lucas, about bedtime stories and soccer games and the way his son's face lit up when Gabriel showed him the ambulance. He wants to be a paramedic when he grows up, Gabriel said, his voice soft with memory. Used to practice bandaging his stuffed animals, making siren sounds while he ran around the apartment. Sarah hated it, said I was filling his head with dangerous ideas. Robert's expression grew thoughtful. What does Lucas say about the custody arrangement? Does he understand why he can't live with you? Gabriel's laugh was bitter. He asks me every weekend why he can't come home with me. I tell him it's complicated, that grown-ups sometimes have to follow rules that don't make sense to kids. What am I supposed to say? That a judge decided his daddy's job makes him a bad father? The words hung heavy in the air between them, Robert's face reddening with shame. As the evening wound down, Elena excused herself to visit the restroom, leaving the two men alone for the first time since that night in the hospital corridor. Robert leaned forward, his voice urgent. "I want to help fix this, Gabriel. I can't undo my decision directly without new evidence or changed circumstances, but there might be ways to revisit the case. Elena and I had been researching family law, talking to colleagues. If you're willing to try again, if you want to fight for full custody, I know attorneys who specialize in appeals." Gabriel stared at him, searching for any sign that this was some elaborate manipulation. "Why would you help me? What's in it for you?" Robert's smile was sad. "Nothing. There's nothing in it for me except maybe the chance to sleep better at night, knowing I helped correct a wrong I committed. You saved my wife's life, Gabriel. You did it professionally, compassionately, without any thought of who she was married to. That tells me everything I need to know about your character, everything I should have known 6 months ago." When Gabriel finally drove home that night, his mind was spinning with possibilities he had forced himself to stop imagining. Could there really be a path back to his son? Was Robert Martinez's change of heart genuine, or was it guilt-driven sentiment that would fade with time? As he sat in his car outside his apartment building, Gabriel pulled out his phone and scrolled to Lucas's contact. His thumb hovered over the call button, imagining his son's sleepy voice asking when Daddy was coming to pick him up for real, not just for supervised visits. The hope that bloomed in Gabriel's chest was fragile and dangerous, but for the first time in months, it felt stronger than the despair that had been his constant companion. Tomorrow he would call the attorney Robert had recommended. Tomorrow he would begin the fight to bring his son home. Tonight, he would allow himself to believe that sometimes the universe offered second chances to those brave enough to take them. The law office of Patricia Hendricks occupied the entire 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, its windows offering a panoramic view of Riverside County that made Gabriel feel both hopeful and insignificant. Patricia herself was nothing like the court-appointed attorney who had fumbled his original case. Sharp-eyed and direct, she listened to Gabriel's story without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad that seemed antiquated among the sleek technology surrounding them. "Robert Martinez recommended me specifically because of my track record with custody reversals," Patricia said after Gabriel finished recounting the events of the past month. "He also provided me with something I've never seen in 20 years of family law." She slid a folder across the polished conference table. Inside was a detailed letter written on judicial letterhead, Robert's signature bold at the bottom. Gabriel read the letter twice, his hands trembling slightly. In formal legal language, Judge Martinez acknowledged that his original custody decision had been influenced by personal bias rather than objective evaluation of Gabriel's parenting capabilities. He cited Gabriel's professional conduct during Elena's medical emergency as evidence of the character traits that made him an exceptional father, not a liability. Most importantly, he requested that the case be reopened and assigned to a different judge for fair reconsideration. "This is unprecedented," Patricia explained, settling back in her leather chair. "Judges don't typically admit to errors in judgment, especially not in writing. Martinez is risking his reputation and potentially his career by putting this on record. It tells me he's serious about making this right." Gabriel stared at the letterhead, trying to process the magnitude of what Robert had done. "What does this mean for my chances?" Patricia's smile was cautious but encouraging. "It means we have grounds for an immediate appeal. Combined with new character witnesses Elena has agreed to provide and documentation of your exemplary service record, we have a strong case. But Gabriel, I need you to understand that this process won't be easy. Sarah's attorney will fight this aggressively. They'll argue that the original decision was sound, and that you're manipulating a guilt-ridden judge. Are you prepared for that battle?" Gabriel thought of Lucas's face during their last supervised visit, how his son had asked if they could have a sleepover soon like they used to. "I've been fighting for my son since the day he was born. This is just a different kind of battlefield." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Then let's go to war." The next 3 weeks blurred together in a whirlwind of legal preparation, affidavits, and character witness interviews. Gabriel continued working his regular shifts, but every spare moment was consumed by building his case. Elena proved to be an invaluable ally, her professional credentials as a pediatric nurse lending weight to her testimony about Gabriel's character and parenting skills. She had observed him during the medical emergency, she wrote in her statement, and had seen the same calm competence and gentle authority that made him excellent at his job, applied to comforting her during the most frightening moment of her life. Dr. Patel from Mercy General provided documentation of Gabriel's exemplary record, noting that in 23 years of service, Gabriel had never lost a patient due to negligence or poor judgment. His colleagues lined up to offer testimony about his reliability, his dedication, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. Chief Williams wrote a particularly powerful letter describing how Gabriel had mentored younger paramedics while maintaining the highest standards of patient care. But the most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source. During a routine supervised visit with Lucas, the court-appointed supervisor, Mrs. Davis, pulled Gabriel aside. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, she said quietly, glancing toward the playground where Lucas was showing off his soccer skills to other children. "I've seen every kind of parent-child relationship you can imagine. What you and Lucas have is special. He lights up when he sees you in a way that breaks my heart every time you have to leave." Mrs. Davis agreed to testify about her observations, noting that Lucas consistently expressed desire to live with his father, and that their relationship showed all the hallmarks of a healthy, secure attachment. Her professional opinion carried significant weight, as she had no personal interest in the case outcome, and had initially supported the original custody arrangement. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Judge Sandra Morrison's courtroom. Gabriel barely slept the night before, alternating between reviewing his testimony with Patricia and staring at the ceiling of his empty apartment. Rodriguez had taken a shift so Gabriel could focus on the hearing, joking that it was the least he could do for his partner, who had saved more lives than anyone deserved to lose custody battles. Judge Morrison was everything Robert Martinez wasn't: warm where he had been cold, engaged where he had been distant. She listened carefully as Patricia presented their case, her expression thoughtful as she reviewed Robert's letter and the supporting documentation. Sarah's attorney, a thin man named Davidson who spoke in clipped, aggressive tones, argued that Gabriel's recent heroics didn't erase the fundamental instability of his profession. "Your Honor," Davidson said, pacing before the bench like a caged animal, "Mr. Chen's job requires him to be available for emergencies at all hours. How can a 7-year-old child feel secure when his primary caregiver might disappear without notice to handle life-and-death situations?" Judge Martinez's original decision was based on sound reasoning about what constitutes a stable home environment. But when Elena took the stand, her quiet authority filled the courtroom. She spoke about the children she treated every day, many from homes where stability meant emotional security rather than predictable schedules. "I've seen children thrive with single parents who work demanding jobs because they know they are loved unconditionally. I've also seen children suffer in homes with perfect schedules, but absent emotional connection. Gabriel Chen has both the love and the competence to provide Lucas with everything a child needs." The breakthrough moment came when Mrs. Davis testified about her observations during supervised visits. "Lucas talks about his father constantly," she told the court. "He knows Daddy helps people who are hurt, and he's proud of that. He's never expressed fear or anxiety about his father's job, only excitement and admiration. The anxiety I observe comes from not understanding why he can't go home with the parent he clearly prefers to be with." Judge Morrison called a recess after Mrs. Davis's testimony, and Gabriel found himself standing in the courthouse corridor with Patricia, Elena, and surprisingly, Robert Martinez. The former judge looked older than he had just weeks earlier, the weight of his mistake evident in the lines around his eyes. "Whatever happens in there," Robert said quietly, "I want you to know that writing that letter was the most important decision I've made as a judge, not because of what happened that night, but because it was the right thing to do." When court resumed, Judge Morrison delivered her ruling with the measured authority of someone who understood the gravity of her decision. "This court finds that the original custody arrangement was based on incomplete consideration of Mr. Chen's parenting capabilities and character. While his profession does involve irregular hours and high-stress situations, the evidence presented demonstrates that these factors have not negatively impacted his relationship with his son or his ability to provide appropriate care." Gabriel felt the words wash over him like a physical force, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, the testimony of multiple witnesses, including the court-appointed supervisor, indicates that Lucas would benefit from increased time with his father. This court hereby orders a new custody evaluation to be completed within 60 days, during which time Mr. Chen will be granted expanded visitation, including overnight visits and weekend custody. The gavel came down with a sound that was the opposite of the one that had shattered Gabriel's world 6 months earlier. This one rang with hope and possibility. With the promise of bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes and soccer games in the backyard, he didn't have yet but would soon be able to afford. Patricia was talking about next steps and evaluation procedures, but Gabriel barely heard her over the rushing sound of relief in his ears. Across the courtroom, Sarah was arguing with her attorney, her face flushed with anger and disbelief. Gabriel felt a moment of sympathy for her, remembering how devastating it had felt to lose primary custody. But then he thought of Lucas waiting at school for news about whether his daddy would be able to pick him up for their first overnight visit in 6 months, and his sympathy was overwhelmed by pure, undiluted joy. As they walked out of the courthouse together, Elena slipped her arm through Gabriel's. "Lucas is going to be so excited," she said, smiling up at him. "Robert and I would like to take you both to dinner this weekend to celebrate if you'd like. Nothing fancy, just friends getting together." Gabriel looked at this woman whose life he had saved, whose husband had almost destroyed his family, and then worked to restore it, and realized that sometimes the most unexpected friendships were the ones that mattered most. "I'd like that," Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion he was still learning how to express. "I'd like that very much." The key turned in the lock of Gabriel's new apartment with a satisfying click that seemed to echo through the spacious 2-bedroom unit. After months of legal battles and custody evaluations, the family court had finally awarded Gabriel primary custody of Lucas, with Sarah receiving weekend visitation rights. The irony wasn't lost on him that their roles had completely reversed, but unlike the bitter victory he might have expected, Gabriel felt only relief and gratitude. Lucas bounded through the front door like a small hurricane, his backpack hitting the floor as he raced to explore every corner of their new home. "Dad, this is so cool! My room has 2 windows, and I can see the playground from here." Gabriel followed more slowly, carrying the last box of Lucas's belongings from Sarah's house. The transition had been surprisingly smooth, with Sarah accepting the court's decision with resignation rather than the fight Gabriel had expected. The new apartment was in a family-friendly complex just 10 minutes from Lucas's school and 15 minutes from the fire station where Gabriel worked. He had specifically chosen it for the proximity to both his son's needs and his professional responsibilities, a balance that the custody evaluation had praised as thoughtful planning rather than the chaotic unpredictability Judge Martinez had once claimed. "Can we set up my bed first?" Lucas called from his new bedroom, his voice carrying the excitement of a child finally coming home. Gabriel smiled, remembering all the nights he had stood in the doorway of Lucas's untouched room in his old apartment, wondering if this day would ever come. "Absolutely, buddy. But first, I have a surprise for you." The surprise was a custom paramedic uniform in Lucas's size, complete with a name tag that read L. Chen, Junior Paramedic. Gabriel had ordered it weeks ago, waiting for the right moment to present it. Lucas's eyes went wide as he held up the small uniform, his face breaking into the kind of pure joy that made every legal battle worth fighting. "Does this mean I can come to work with you sometimes?" Lucas asked, his small hands tracing the patches on the uniform shirt. Gabriel knelt down to his son's level, his heart full in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. "On special occasions, when it's safe and Chief Williams says okay. But more importantly, it means you never have to be ashamed of what Daddy does for work. It means we're proud of helping people. You and me." They spent the afternoon setting up Lucas's room, hanging posters of superheroes and emergency vehicles on walls that would finally hear bedtime stories again. Gabriel found himself stopping periodically just to watch his son, to absorb the reality that they were finally home together. The supervised visits and weekend custody had been precious, but this was different. This was the simple intimacy of ordinary life, of arguing about whether vegetables belonged on pizza and negotiating bedtime on school nights. That evening, as promised, Elena and Robert came for dinner, bringing a homemade lasagna and a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate. The 4 of them sat around Gabriel's small dining table, Lucas chattering excitedly about his new school schedule and weekend plans. Robert listened with genuine interest, asking questions about Lucas's favorite subjects and hobbies with the same attention he had once reserved for legal briefs. "Uncle Robert," Lucas said suddenly, using the title he had bestowed on the former judge during their first meeting. "Daddy says you used to make important decisions about families. Did you help him bring me home?" Robert's face grew serious, and Gabriel saw him exchange a meaningful look with Elena. They had all agreed to keep the full details of their complicated history private until Lucas was older, but the boy deserved some version of the truth. "I made some mistakes before," Robert said carefully, "but your dad and Elena helped me understand how to do better. Sometimes grown-ups need help learning how to make the right choices." Lucas nodded solemnly, then brightened. "That's okay. Daddy says everyone makes mistakes sometimes. The important thing is fixing them." After dinner, while Lucas showed Elena his room and explained his elaborate plan for organizing his action figures, Gabriel and Robert found themselves on the small balcony overlooking the playground. The evening air carried the sounds of children playing and families gathering for barbecues, the ordinary symphony of community life that Gabriel had missed during his months of isolation. "I never properly thanked you," Gabriel said, watching Lucas through the sliding glass door as he demonstrated his superhero poses for Elena. "What you did, the letter, the testimony, putting your reputation on the line. I know what it cost you." Robert was quiet for a moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "It didn't cost me anything that mattered, but I gained something I didn't expect." Gabriel looked at him questioningly, and Robert smiled. "I gained the knowledge that I could admit when I was wrong and work to make it right. That's not something I was sure I was capable of before all this happened." He paused, then added, "Elena says you're thinking about going back to school, maybe becoming a nurse practitioner. Is that true?" Gabriel nodded, still somewhat surprised by his own decision. "The custody evaluation made me realize I want to expand my skills. Maybe work in pediatric emergency medicine. I've saved a lot of lives over the years, but I want to do more than just stabilize and transport." Lucas is excited about the idea of Daddy becoming a nurse, too. Robert's smile was warm. "Elena would be thrilled to help with recommendations, program applications, anything you need. She's been hoping for an excuse to mentor someone with your experience." As the evening wound down and their guests prepared to leave, Lucas insisted on showing Robert his junior paramedic uniform one more time. The former judge knelt down to examine the patches and insignia with serious attention, his transformation from the cold arbiter of Gabriel's fate to this warm family friend still striking in its completeness. "You know what this means," Robert told Lucas, adjusting the boy's name tag with gentle hands. "It means you're part of a team that helps people. That's a big responsibility." Lucas puffed up with pride. "I know. Daddy taught me that helping people is the most important job in the world. That's why I'm going to be just like him when I grow up." After Elena and Robert left, Gabriel tucked Lucas into his new bed for the first time in their new home. The bedtime routine was familiar, but felt different here, permanent in a way the weekend visits never had. Lucas asked for 3 stories instead of his usual 2, clearly testing the boundaries of this new freedom, and Gabriel indulged him because he could, because there was no court-appointed supervisor watching the clock, because they had all the time in the world. "Dad," Lucas said sleepily as Gabriel turned off the bedside lamp, "I'm really glad we're home." Gabriel kissed his son's forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of childhood that he had missed more than he could express. "Me too, buddy. Me too." Standing in the doorway of Lucas's room, watching his son sleep in the soft glow of the nightlight shaped like an ambulance, Gabriel felt the last piece of his broken world click back into place. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, school forms to fill out, and work schedules to coordinate, and all the ordinary complications of single parenthood. But tonight, they were home. The emergency radio on Gabriel's belt was silent for once, but he knew it would crackle to life again soon, calling him to help someone else's family in crisis. When it did, he would answer as he always had, with skill and compassion, and the unshakable belief that every life was worth saving. But now he would come home afterward to his son's stories about school and soccer practice, to homework help and goodnight hugs, and all the beautiful mundane moments that made saving lives meaningful. In the quiet of their new apartment, with Lucas safe in his bed and years of love stretching ahead of them, Gabriel finally understood what he had been fighting for all along. It wasn't just custody or visitation rights or legal vindication. It was this: The simple miracle of being home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.